Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome back. I hope you all had a great week. I want to thank all of you who tuned in on Wednesday night with Dave and Mike King for all the love outpouring that you gave. It was a very nice welcome back from vacation. I love and appreciate all of you. It was just an awesome thing. And awesome things happening tonight, too. We've got a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful panel tonight of some of my favorite people in the world. And I don't think I'm going to hold them back from you any longer because they are just wonderful, wonderful people. So without further ado, let me bring you my panel here as we go to discuss how the white hat controlled mainstream media is still being allowed to put the same crap out. So here we go. We've got the wonderful and lovely Patriot Underground. And then we've got TruthStream with Joe Rosati and Scott Stone. And my personal boy chick at the bottom there. Very excellent, excellent news anchor and news reporter, the one and only Ken Rosato.
Oh, I thought you were talking about someone else. I'm sorry.
Michelle couldn't make it. So here we are, guys. How is everybody doing tonight?
Great.
Doing well.
Hey, don't
Can't
everybody
complain.
answer at once. It's okay. Yeah. I know it's respect, but let's not be so reserved here. So everybody's been watching. Everybody's seen all the crap that's been going on over the past few weeks. There's been a whole lot of information that's been put out there. And yet it seems with everything going on and everything that everybody is talking about, the white hat controlled or allegedly white hat controlled, but I'm saying, yes, the white hat controlled mainstream media is still allowing them to put out the same narrative. Now, we know that they're allowing that because we have to show how lying and ridiculous mainstream media has been all these years. But it does reach a point where it reaches the height of the ridiculous. So just based on that, before we get to some of my favorite topics here, let's go around the horn and see how you feel about what I've just said. So, Patriot Underground, let's start with you in the center square.
All right. Well, it's great to be back. And obviously, I love coming on Respect. It's a great conversation. It's great to be here with you, of course, Mark, my good friend, and also Joe and Scott. We always have excellent discussions. And I also just got a chance to meet Ken Rosato for the first time. So I'm really excited about this. And honestly, when you sent me the invitation, I was like, this is a really great topic because it brings me right back to where I started with my journey. And before I started to really wrap my brain around the whole concept that you just outlined briefly there, that the white hats are in control and they're allowing the mainstream media to continue to prop up the illusion of old, which is kind of like the keeping their street cred, as Mike King likes to say, but at the same time, dropping all of these truth nuggets. It's painful for us who already know what's going on. But, I used to talk about this all the time because we recognize that all of the masses out there, the normies, they don't believe anything to be true unless they actually hear the mainstream media say it. And so it's kind of like this balance that they're striking right now where they're putting out, well, first of all, they're bringing up topics that they would never bring up prior to the white hats taking over control of the mainstream media. I think we can all agree on that. There's certainly a lot we could probably disagree on, but the fact that they're talking about and highlighting certain topics is, at least in my mind, proof that they're actually pulling the strings behind the scene. But at the same time, it's that the illusion that there's opposition to Trump's agenda, and they're putting up all of these. They're basically telling you the truth on one hand, but on the other hand, they're criticizing everything that Trump is doing. I think it's being done, like you said, Mark, to gradually get the penny to drop with all of their listeners that, wait a second, the mainstream media is lying. And that's really the key to this whole thing. I mean, I can remember back in my early shows, that's all I would talk about. It was just like, why don't they just take over the mainstream media and start telling people the truth? It's going to be a painful process. People are going to resist it. They're not going to want to listen, but eventually they'll come around. And this was back in, like early 2021, in the early days of the fake Biden presidency. And so here we are. I can't believe it's already September of 2025. And it's amazing because we're still basically having that same conversation. Not to suggest that amazing progress hasn't been made, but at the same time, it is a very, very slow process. And I think we can get into some of the reasons behind that tonight. I could go on, but I'll pass it over to my good friend Joe.
Mr. Rosati.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Patriot Underground. Sometimes it's hard not. I know his name, and it's hard not to say that.
You can call me PU if you want. I mean, Emma started doing that. So.
The very first time that I had you on the show, that was such a problem for me. And I think I even spoke to you about it. I said, look, I can't go on the air and call you PU.
Yeah, we've had many laughs about that one. Yes. Rambo just went for it. So I was like, all right, whatever. Yeah. People have called me lots of things. So I guess,
right.
Go ahead, Jojo.
Well, I think that's what blows me away is what we're watching. And, I'll let friends know, hey, and this is what was brought up on News Treason a few months back, that everybody has to have their own aha moment. They have to see that something is wrong. But how this is orchestrated to me is what's so amazing. Because if we're watching doubles or clones or whatever, or people that are replacing these actors, what blows my mind is how they're keeping such a rap on it. Because these actors, they have family members, they have relatives. If in fact Trump is a double, when his granddaughter, I think it's Kai, goes up after golfing to go see her grandpa Trump, you'd think she might go, wait a second, I don't know how they're doing all this. So that's what's blowing my mind. But I get that, we're watching a movie, but there's also very real things going on. So I think as this unfolds, I can't wait till we can have a round table with some of these people that were quote unquote actors and talked about how did they do all this. It's incredible. So I'll keep it short, but that's what's blowing my mind. Scott, off to you.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the media, I mean, this is sort of the linchpin of this whole mechanism by which they controlled the truth, or what they wanted to project as the truth. When Trump called it out, it was a fundamental moment, early on. But it's really interesting, just before the show, I was watching a clip with Mark Zuckerberg sitting next to Trump, and he was asked, how much are you going to spend, in the United States as an organization and so on. And he thought about it. He's like, 600 million or 600 billion, kind of a thing. And he was sort of looking to Trump. Well, later in a hot mic moment, he said, I wasn't sure which number you wanted me to go with. Like, he is so in Trump's pocket. It's not even funny. And I don't think it's just him. I think it's all of them.
They were all compliment. They were Tim Cook and Bill. They're so happy to be there.
Yeah. And they're walking the Green Mile. I mean, if that's even them, like, as you astutely pointed out, Joe, we could be watching Masks or, who knows, but it's delightful. It's like being in on the joke, for those of us that have invested, in the truth over the years. It's kind of a really entertaining and fun moment. I can't imagine what it's like for the average normie, how confused they must be. But what a great moment with Zuckerberg there. I think we're going to have many more of those here in the near future.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. I want to know what you guys think about how that's going to unfold.
That's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mr. Rosato, since we share such a wonderful background, how do you think that this relates to what we used to do?
Look, I know that when I used to arrive, I did the morning show at Channel 7 in New York for 20 years. And I know when I would arrive at between 3 and 3:30 in the morning, I would hear the assignment desk talking with the executive producer. And inevitably, whatever was the headline of the day in the New York Times was what all of the networks would go with. And the networks would hand that down to the local news desks. And that was the marching order for the local news desk. So it wasn't organized per se, or maybe it was. But the bottom line is whatever the talking point was at the Times, became the talking point at all of the networks. You could go through history. You'll find of the top 3 stories, you'll consistently see at least 2 will be consistent across the board with the networks. How does that happen? Well, either they're picking up the phone and colluding, I should say, not colliding, colluding, or it's just a miracle. Well, clearly, I mean, I'm a man of faith, but not that much faith. I'm sorry. Mark will tell you. Mark is chuckling because he knows I was a priest at one point. But the reality here is that there is definitely a you can call it a conspiracy. I think it's a disconnected conspiracy. What do I mean by that? I think that it's just a pecking order that's been established through time, that whatever the New York Times says, everybody else will go with, or else you look like a renegade. And you have members of the media in New York City all living in the same Upper West Side neighborhood. They all have the same mindset. They all go to the same J schools, and they think that anything outside of the norm of their world is radical right wing. If you are just middle of the road, if you believe that it's okay to sit down and talk with somebody on the left and the right to get ideas at the same time, you're a right-wing extremist in their minds. Why? Well, because anyone who would even consider sitting down and talking to someone on the right is a freak, is a nut. I remember something that another friend of mine who does radio. Let's just give you a hint. He's now the deputy director of the FBI, and I won't tell you who though. DB. Dan used to say, Dan Bongino, of course, used to say the difference between Democrats and Republicans. I don't know that there's that much of a difference, but let's just say that he would say the difference between Democrats and Republicans are Republicans look at Democrats as good people with bad ideas. Democrats look at Republicans as bad people. And it's an interesting thing when you consider it that way. The idea is, well, why even bother sitting down? Because they're evil, diabolical freaks. We don't want to sit down and have a dialogue with them. Just shut them out. So we saw that happening during the pandemic. We saw even the New York Post taken off. It was deplatformed from X for, God forbid, suggesting that Hunter Biden's laptop was a real thing. It's amazing. And of course, the social media platforms back then denied it. They denied having any collusion with the White House. And then we find out they did. They were on the phone back and forth. It was all manipulation, all propaganda behind the scenes. And yet everybody out there who had then a Twitter account thought, of course, Twitter's just protecting freedom of speech. And this is just propaganda from the Trump administration and right-wing freaks, et cetera. Now, but this is the problem. When you have any cluster of people who have a similar mindset and they systematically exclude the other side, that's when we get into trouble. And I think that's what mainstream media has done for decades. And they look at it as centrist and normal. But obviously it's not. And we were fooled long enough until we had enough social media freedom to get out there and have discussions among one another.
Ken, if I could ask, I've got two quick questions. One, did you start your newscasting at the age of 17 or something? How could you do 20 years?
I love you. I'm almost 60, so I appreciate you. But I did start when I was very young. I actually did a cable show at 12, and I was on commercial radio at 17 and commercial television at 21. So it's been a lot of years.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the other question, a little more serious, is we've all seen the clips where you have, the various newscasters repeating the same turn of phrase, across the country. I'm told they receive a script at 4 a.m. or it goes out at 4 a.m. And it's very scripted what they do. They've signed entertainment contracts, that which is kind of a slippery way of getting, outside of, any obligation to tell the truth. But do you have any evidence of those scripts going out?
Yeah, one of the anchors in that video that went viral, where they keep popping up more and more boxes and they're all saying the same thing at the same time, is a friend of mine, Dave Bondi, who was an anchor in Detroit, and very good friend. In fact, he does a podcast called Keeping It Real with Dave Bondi, and it uncovers a lot of the media silliness. He left mainstream media, as I did, and he talked about the fact that was one particular company that was trying to do a promo that would be company-wide. So that was, of course, somebody leaked that to the rest of the world. So now it looks like it's all media. It's actually every single one of those stations is, I think it was I don't want to say the wrong name. I think it was Sinclair. I'm not sure. That's a major broadcasting company. So every one of those little boxes you saw were all part of Sinclair Broadcasting, or if it was Sinclair, it was one of the major TV companies. So that's not unusual, if you will, because even when I was at ABC, we would get promo things. You'd work with a charity at a certain time of year. So every anchor would read the same thing. What would be frightening, though, is if people at different companies were reading the same line. And that does happen. All you have to do is hear the NBC News anchor saying the same thing, like sharp as a tack. President was sharp as a tack. He was sharp as a tack. He was sharp as a tack. When you hear that, you know that's coming from one source, and that is the New York Times, period.
Well, when you said company, I thought you meant the company, CIA.
Well, listen, I'm not saying that isn't the case, and
Right.
it could very well be the case. It's just too much of a coincidence. Why would everybody go along with the concept that if the Times says it, then we go with it, unless there's a little more to it? Just a little too odd. If this is truly a commercial project, if broadcasting is meant to just bring in dollars, then why would they go with something that they know is now a losing means? They're no longer making the ad revenue that they used to make. Because people now see through them. They've lost their credibility, yet they are doubling and tripling down. It makes no sense. Take a look at Colbert. And I'm sorry, now I feel like I'm monopolizing this. We can go on this. And Mark, stop me at any point. Just say, shut up, Wojciech.
No, what I was going to say in regard to what you guys were talking about, you remember what they used to say in regard to basically CBS, NBC, Fox, and Pix.
Yeah.
That our noon show was their afternoon meeting.
Yes.
And wherever we were live, if they weren't already, boom, they showed up. So there is a lot of likeness that goes on. Might not be saying the exact same words, might not be getting that quote unquote 4 a.m. script, but there is so much. It's always been a cutthroat business, and these companies would cut each other's throats for one viewer, except when it came to the point of negotiating with the unions for their salaries.
Mm-hmm.
Then they all would gang up together, work together to make sure that while they got a 30% raise, you got 2%. So
Or a cut.
Or a cut. Yes.
I think my fellow workers, we all had cuts twice when I was there.
Oh yeah. So it's an interesting business. But in regard to that, let's get on to some of my favorite recent topics. Now, all of you know that I love wordplay. And this guy was just too damn easy to wordplay with. And when I looked at him, I said, oh, his name is I Madman. So let's bring in I Madman. Okay. Now this Yutz is running for mayor of New York, and in my opinion is going to win the mayoral race in New York. I think that's all been scripted and everything else just to prove how stupid the whole thing is. And it's not just him alone. He, for the optics of it, attracts other idiots like this fossil. Okay. And it just goes on and on and on. But yet when you see and you think, and this is the point that I've tried to bring home numerous times, when you think, when you just use your brain and you listen to what this guy is saying, free this, free that, you're all good, everything's going to be free. And how are you going to pay for it? Well, we're going to tax the wealthy. Now, I'm sorry, but there just ain't enough wealthy people in the world to pay the taxes to fund all these things that they want, or to cut our national deficit, just our national deficit, never mind everybody else's. And yet most of the people, and I don't like using adjectives, but most of the people on the left just don't get it. And how could you think that more taxes and more oppression on the people of the city and the state is going to allow you to have this free stuff. I mean, I know I was told as a kid, ain't no such thing as free lunch. So let's go the opposite way around. You can speak again, Ken.
Oy. Yeah, I am shocked by how many people of the Jewish persuasion, do you know any of them, Mark, in New York City?
You know, for a minute, I really can't think about nobody, but I'll think for a minute.
What is it? And now I'm not talking about the Orthodox, but I'm talking about a lot of non-religious Jews in New York City who so overwhelmingly support the left blindly that they are supporting this man who is pro everything that they technically are not pro. And if you look at some of the organizations, the guy's pro Hamas, all right? Hamas would cut off the heads of any Jew from New York and any gay guy in New York. Yet you have gays and Jews screaming from the mountaintops to support this guy. That I do not comprehend. I think part of it is he's got his little cute impish smile, and I think he says just the right words for Gen Y and Gen Z. And that's who you have at TV stations today, is young female producers. It's almost overwhelmingly female producers now. When Mark and I started back in the day, it was probably 80 to 90% male, and now it's very female. With the DEI of TV, we have to balance it out. So balancing it out means going 90% in the other direction. And as a result, I've heard we had our executive producer on our show, who was a 27-year-old woman from Indiana. Her experience was she was a producer in Indiana for a couple of years. Then she spent a year or two in like a year, I think, in Houston. And then boom, she's the executive producer of the morning show in New York at the #1 station. How does that happen? When we took decades to get where we are. She's just that good, Ken. Yeah. That's why they're now in 3rd place in New York. Anyway, no sour grapes here. None at all.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And they all know who we're talking about, who's in the industry watching, and they are watching. I know that. But the bottom line is, I think what you have is you have these ignorant people in the industry who are just smitten with the stupid surface stuff, like, oh, he has a cute smile. Oh, he's a nice guy. And if I have to hear Gen Zers say, you've had your chance, it's now our chance, one more time, I'll puke. What does that mean? Our chance to do what? To blow up the world? Our chance to do what? To dive off a cliff? And by the way, we're not dead yet. So your chance will come when we're dead. Until then, it's not your chance. Stand in line, Junior. That's my attitude. Sorry.
And Scott, how much of it do you think is TDS?
Well, how much of it is TDS and how much of it is just
Stupidity.
or order followers, brown shirts? I mean, I think that's a great deal of the TDS, but it astounds me. When you look at what the left is rooting for these days, it's rapists and murderers, and I mean, quite literally. There was the whole thing about the Ukrainian gal that was brutally stabbed on a subway, and it got zero media attention, literally zero. It's so outrageous. It's not even funny. What are they doing? They protested Doge because apparently they like fraud, waste, and abuse. This defies all logic and reason, all presumably because they hate the orange man. And we're never going to be able to make any sense of it. I mean, maybe there's a team of psychologists trying to figure out, maybe it's SSRIs. That's where we get school shootings. I don't know at this point. But I think there's a certain amount of dishonesty with oneself to be able to participate at this point in any TDS. I mean, maybe you don't like the way the guy looks, but the results sure are favorable across the board. So, but they're listening to mainstream, and mainstream continues to tell them what, Orange Man bad.
Exactly.
Cost of living going down is bad. Criminals being pulled off the streets, that's bad. We need more rapes, murders, and crime. It doesn't make any sense.
It's crazy. I mean, Joe, when you watch I Madman and you listen to him speak and you listen to him carry on and you listen and watch all of these people going in for selfies and all the other, what does it make you think?
Well, I see that I'm looking more at a parallel, if you will, because I haven't watched too much of him, to be perfectly honest with you. But I see the same thing with people tearing down RFK Jr., yet not even questioning Fauci. It's really interesting to see so many of these people. If anyone at all is affiliated with Trump, they want to tear him down. And I had some recent posts. I still post on Facebook and still try and read the room. What's been amazing though, guys, is now I have like 98% of phenomenal comments on my Facebook posts. If anyone's going to attack me, they're going to realize, oh wow, there's about 40 or 50 people that agree with what Joe's saying. And so that's been a great tool. But it's just there's some people, they just cannot see past it. No matter, I can direct them, if they don't think that RFK Jr. is qualified, I'm like, okay, how about listening to Dr. Paul Thomas, who Scott and I had the chance to interview last year, an amazing pediatrician, has looked, he used to completely be by the book with all the jabs and he's figured out on his own how bad they are. You can direct them, just amazing resources, and they still want to tear that person down. So I'm just seeing that if these people, some people, they just can't get it yet. So I don't know what their aha moment's going to be. So I'll leave that one there and go on to Patriot Underground, unless you want to interject, Mark, of course.
Well, I was just going to ask Patriot Underground, you're from not quite as well, actually, if you look at the demographics here, we're all from highly blue areas, and you guys, for us, it's the city. For Ken and I, it's the city. For you guys, it's the whole damn state. And for you, Patriot, it's the area. Not really the whole state, but a good part of it. How do you see this going with this?
Well, in all honesty, I think that Mamdani is an actor. I think he's a white hat plant. I mean, you have to look. It really all depends on what lens you look at it. If you look at it at the surface level, and you try to analyze all of these people fawning over him and so forth, that these clips that you see on TV, that's going to take you in one direction. But if it's over the top, it's an op. And this guy is so far over the top that you have to look at it, at least in my opinion, through that lens. The whole purpose of everything that we're witnessing right now is to gradually reverse the brainwashing. And this is brainwashing, by the way, that predates Trump. I mean, we're talking about decades and decades and decades of liberal, quote unquote, ideology. And you're absolutely right, Mark. I live in the belly of the beast, and I work in an industry that's as quote unquote liberal as it gets. And these people are not going to simply just relinquish their ideology. It's like the Mark Twain quote. If it's easier to con people than to convince them that they've been conned.
Yep.
And that, I think, is really the whole point of what we're watching right now. They're taking this to such a level, to such an extreme, in order to show people. And gradually in the process, it ties into the overarching conversation tonight that we're having about mainstream media, is to allow the mainstream media to go so far over the top, and these white hat plants along with them to go so far over the top that it starts to bring people around. And I think that we're seeing evidence of that. Just if you look at the demographic shift in New York City, I think it was back in, I want to say, early 2025, that a vast majority of the people, I don't, maybe not a vast majority, but at least 60% of the people thought that New York had become too violent, that they're favoring more police officers, something at like 70%. Black voters went up. Hispanic voters went up. Everybody is now shifting to the right. So you also have to remember what we see depicted on mainstream media is not the reality. And I think that's really the whole point, is to gradually kind of box the mainstream media in. And it kind of goes back to the whole idea of, are we watching a movie to the degree that you think that we're actually watching a movie? Now, as you know, I tend to lean pretty far in the direction of full control. And I think that the white hats are pulling all the strings behind the scenes. And it goes back to what Ken was saying. This is something that Mike King and I talk about on a weekly basis. He does the anti-New York Times, as you know. And he's been following the headlines. He's been reading the New York Times for like 30 years. And every single week we document how they're gradually blackpilling their readers. And we go into an amazing amount of detail with that. Sure, people are still they're not going to give up on their ideology easily, but as they start to see the demographic shifting more and more and more toward the right, the one thing about the left is they have this kind of groupthink mentality, and they kind of they travel in packs, they travel in herds, and I think that's what we're starting to witness happen more and more and more. And the white hats have taken that same basic model of the New York Times as the paper of record that gives the marching orders to all of mainstream media, and they've reversed that. Not to mention that, and I mentioned the movie aspect just a moment ago, not everything that we're seeing is being depicted by actors. There is an organic element to it. It's a hybrid sort of a situation. My theory is that behind the scenes, the white hats have taken control of the major nodes of power. And in many cases, they're giving their marching orders to the underlings, or the lower tier, which would include, of course, the mainstream media, who perhaps don't even know that they're being manipulated. They're being told what subjects to talk about, to bring things up. It's like I mentioned in my opening comments, we're seeing things talked about and discussed on CNN, MSNBC, topics that would just get flat out ignored in years past. And now all of a sudden, even though they're framing them as as bad overall, they're having voices on CNN, especially what's that guy who he does the polls? I can never remember the guy's name.
He's so great.
Enthusiastic about the implosion of the Democrat Party. You see week after week after week, the same voices in the New York Times that they're doing a complete 180, and they're talking about why the Democratic Party is falling apart, why so many people are moving to the right. Somebody brought up Gen Z a little while ago. I don't think it's a secret at this point. Gen Z is moving very, very far to the right. And so it's easy to get caught up in the optics of it all and sort of take things and cherry pick certain things where Mamdani is walking through the street and people are taking selfies and they're all fawning over him. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure a lot of people actually believe that, but you have to question how much of this is organic and how much of it is not organic. And scrolling out really and looking at the bigger picture, you can see very clearly that the plan is working because the Democratic Party and the mainstream media is losing credibility on a daily basis. They're bleeding out. And so that's the way I look at it. I don't think for a second that when you see characters like him, when you see characters like Ilhan Omar and AOC and all of these people that are making the Democrats look horrible. They're making all of this left-wing ideology look more and more shocking and really anti-American. So that's the way I look at it. I think that overall, the white hat replacements, if you will, like the people that they've taken off the chessboard, the ones who used to give the marching orders have been replaced. And that's why we're seeing a very different slant on mainstream media.
Well, you all brought up some really good points, and they make for a really good segue into the next part of it, because when you see what they report and what the mainstream tends to report as opposed to the alternative, and you see the differences, and certain things are just, am I supposed to believe what I'm hearing from you, or am I supposed to believe what's happening right behind you?
Mhm.
You know, are my eyes deceiving me, or are you deceiving me? So when you get to kind of the justice stage of this, and you've got, you know, Gene Pirro cracking down on what would be considered a minor committing murder, armed robbery, or anything else being considered as an adult. Or you've got Tom Homan talking about, and this is probably the most common thing that gets brought up by the mainstream media and by liberals themselves. And they always seem to forget the word illegal aliens and people who are committing crimes against American citizens. And nobody in the mainstream media has ever bothered to ask any one of these lunatics, I'm sorry, how many of them are you housing?
Mhm.
How many of you put up in your house? How many of you invited in for dinner with your little kids, et cetera, et cetera? They've all got a big mouth. And as I've complained about for a long time in regard to, I'm a very, very charitable person, but I determine who I give the charity to, not somebody else. And that includes the government. And every time that the government does this, or that the left screams about it, that's our money that you're playing with. So let's move on to Scott. What do you feel about this?
Well, I've got a question actually for you and for Ken regarding Carlos Slim. I mean, you know, this guy isn't just a media mogul. He did amass a astounding net worth, but I mean, what do we know about this guy? We're talking about the paper of record, you know, the New York Times, among other outlets and whatnot. You guys would certainly know more than I on that topic, but who is Carlos Slim?
You want to go first, Ken?
Yeah, well, I know he's a philanthropist from Mexico. He's worth billions. Philanthropist. We put that in air quotes. The question is, where did the money come from? You know, how did the money get to him? And is it just? I mean, obviously, you could. There are many people who believe that the money was funneled to him, and then he funnels it back, and that's part of the game. Do we know for a fact? I think the people who try to investigate that will probably be unalived. Let's put it that way, if we could use that as a term. But yeah, that's a very good question. And I'm sure that, along with where does George Soros's money go and how does it get routed to the various sources, et cetera. Even the Koch brothers, you know, the Koch brothers have been manipulating on both sides over the decades. It's not just one side. We used to think on the right that years ago, oh, they were big Republican fundraisers and they donated to the Republicans, until such time that the Republicans don't do what they want. Then all of a sudden they'll give to this party, they'll give to Mamdani, et cetera. They're manipulators, clearly. So, and that's just the way it is. And now that we have so many billionaires in our society, I'm firmly convinced that they're the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes right now. You know, especially now as we see broadcasting as an industry dying on the vine. There just aren't advertising dollars, and these companies are just shedding employees by the day.
Well, it's just pharmaceutical ad revenue at this point, and when that gets cut off, it'll be kind of like USAID getting cut off. And you mentioned Soros money. I think we're finding out that Soros money is really our money, taxpayer money, just going through the, you know, the Gates wheel or whatever we want to call it. And I don't think he's spending much. He's certainly never going to run out. So that's a special kind of abuse there. But Mark, what do you think?
To me, I don't really care one way or the other about Carlos. I don't care who owns any of the media companies. What's important to me, and I've said it a billion times already, journalism is ascertaining the facts and presenting them to the public and letting the public determine what's real or what's not. When, because of your position or your power, you turn it into editorialism and you insert your opinion over what the facts happen to be, then you're a problem. So I don't really care who owns any of the companies. But if you're going to screw with what the truth is, then you shouldn't be there. Simple as that.
Definitely.
Well, I
So,
think
Joe,
what's happening really is the hypocrisy of the mainstream media as well is being fully exposed. I mean, outside of the, let's just say the 4 to 6% that was mentioned in the drops that are never going to actually wake up, they're going to resist it to the bitter end. How many people out there are still really watching mainstream media and believing mainstream media? We hear it all the time. The legacy media is dead. Ken just said it. It's dying on the vine. The ad revenue is disappearing, and all of these things just so happen to be happening during this new age with Trump and with Q. I mean, do we really think that this is a mistake? That this is some sort of a coincidence? That the Democrats historically, I mean, you go back to the days of Bill Clinton, back in the 90s, and even before that, they would always hide behind, they'd always create the illusion, even with Obama, that they were more to the center. It's like the Saul Alinsky playbook. They would always pretend as if they were center. They'd say what they have to say to get into office. And then, of course, they would go ahead and enact all of their policies. And now they don't do that. Now we have people like AOC. Now we have Ilhan Omar. Now we have this Mamdani character. And they're getting, you just have to stop and think about it logically for a second. With all of the poll numbers going in the wrong direction, with more and more people moving to the right, in the real world, don't you think that the Democrats would say, hey, we gotta pump the brakes here. We gotta make it look as if we're not so hardcore extreme to the left. And that's exactly the opposite of what we're seeing happen. Right? Nobody trusts mainstream media anymore. And that's why, I mean, and the other thing, of course, is the white hats have set it up in such a way that, yes, they give the mainstream media their talking points, whether you believe that or you don't, whether you still think it's, the same old characters. I go back to Executive Orders 13818, 13848. I believe that all of these people have been removed. But even if you want to believe that these same people are giving their talking points, right, it's having the exact opposite effect. All right. And everything, you always have to look at it like cui bono. Who benefits from everything that's happening? It's Trump. It's the white hats. It's the patriots. It's all of us. And that's why, so you've got, even if you want to believe that the mainstream media of old is still functioning the way that it used to organically, you've also got Elon, who took control of X. You've got all of these other social media platforms that are now allowing free speech out of nowhere to even if they want to put out whatever narrative they put out, it's debunked within 30 seconds. And it goes viral. Like, people get their news from social media, and more they get their news from people either who do work similar to what myself and Mark and Joe and Scott do, or with Ken, people who have kind of defected from the mainstream media. These are the people that are trusted now. It's not the legacy press, and it's all by design. It goes back to the beginning. What is this all about? It's all about discrediting the mainstream media to such an extent that it appears as if people are organically waking up on their own. Like, we all wanted the mainstream media. I shouldn't say all of us, but I think most of us expected and believed in, maybe back in in late 2020, early 2021, that they were never going to allow Biden to take office, and they were never going to allow this stolen election to move forward. They were going to take control of the mainstream media. They were going to just show everybody how the election had been stolen, and basically just kind of have a hostile approach to it all. But the reality is that probably wouldn't have worked back then. In retrospect, we can see it a lot clearer. So even though it moves at a glacier's pace and it's frustrating, you can track over time how the actions that have been taken behind the scenes have led us to where we are right now. And I would argue that most of what we're seeing is all contrived. I mean, the white hats made it very clear that they're the gatekeepers of all information, and that they're the ones who are putting on. And it's just like if the New York Times of old, the legacy press of old, could, start at the top and give all of their marching orders from the top down, the white hats can do the same exact thing. They've just reversed the entire process as a way of gradually reversing the brainwashing that has taken root over such a long time.
Two things, if I may just jump in really fast to bolster that point. Just think about this fact. Stephen Colbert, and I briefly mentioned it before, Stephen Colbert, his show is losing $45 million a year. What kind of a business model is that? And what company takes that and says, okay, let's just keep losing 45 million. Do you think that if you ran a deli that was losing even $45,000 a year, you would keep the business model exactly as it was and keep running it that way? Clearly, they were using it as a tool of propaganda. They didn't care that it was losing 45 million. It basically was the cost of doing business for CBS in that case. So I'm convinced no company would let a person like that last the years he did unless they were fully in bed with that concept and they were using that as a propaganda tool. The other thing I wanted to point out, we're talking about social media, and I'm just holding this. I'm going to zoom in. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see if this works. And let's see if it autofocuses. There we go. All right. So let me just say this. The other day I asked, will Mayorkas be prosecuted by the Trump administration? I asked Google's AI this. Look what it says. As of September 2025, there is no official Trump administration since Donald Trump is not the president. However, Trump has suggested he would look into arresting former DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas if he returns to office in 2025. That was Gemini, which is the AI for Google. And I've been trying to reach somebody at Google for days, and nobody will return my calls. I find that very cute. That's what AI is telling us when we ask about, I didn't even ask, is Donald Trump president? I asked, is the Trump administration looking at potentially charging Alejandro Mayorkas with a crime? And that was the response I got from Google's AI, not some third-party tiny AI. Found that a little interesting, and I would love to get your take on that.
See, now I'm going to dump this right in your lap, Joe. Okay, because with what Ken just said and with what Patriot and Scott were talking about before, this is a situation whereby we have been attempting to unbrainwash the brainwashing that the mainstream media has done for decades. And in reality, the target of that unbrainwashing is people like us and older. But the younger generation is on their phones or they're on the tablets and they're getting social media. Google, X, well, not so much X, but Google and Instagram and all of the other crap, the TikTok that are out there, are all putting out false information, misinformation, and in fact, trying to exacerbate child trafficking and other stuff. So you're working on one end, but kind of defeating yourself on the other because you're not focusing as much there. So how does that get handled?
Oh, it's a good question. Well, this is what I notice about a lot of social media. The comment section is really, really important. I will, before I even watch a video, a lot of times on YouTube, I'll read a few of the comments just to kind of gauge what the climate is, if you will. So I don't know. I think there's the social media, and then people will reach out to friends, and I think that I think people are becoming more and more aware that they can look for other types of content to either back it up, or the comments, or friends. And so I think people are pretty sharp. And now with AI, with the show that we did last night, thanks to you for introducing us to Thomas, just to find certain folks that are using AI as a tool. And it blew me away. And we played this clip last night that AI is meant to walk us home, if you will, so that we don't even have to really rely on that anymore. And this leads into, I was going to mention something about Dr. David Martin. And I find it really interesting, Ken, that you're wearing a suit, but you're not wearing a tie. And part of why I bring that up, the callers, when I had the honor of being at Dr. David Martin's 12 Senses class in Boulder, Colorado in 2024, you know, I've learned we have 12 senses, not 5. We have 12 cranial nerves, and one is the esophageal. And you think of the priests and their collars and in suits and ties. It's much easier to lie if all this is covered up, right? Because there's afferent, which is for ourselves, and efferent, which is for others, and then of the 12 senses, a few of them are for both. So we can hopefully live in truth for humanity and have each other's back and help each other. And if we're living in truth, then that's the highest vibration frequency. So I guess my point is I wanted to ask Ken a question. What makes you wear the suit? You look sharp, by the way, but without the tie. Is there any reason for not having the tie? And are you aware that we have 12 senses and not 5?
I'll answer the second question first. No, I was not aware.
Okay.
And two, I am wearing this outfit because this is what I'm in my studio where I do my morning show on it's a channel called On New Jersey. This is the MO for me for that show. Because I spent 30 plus years as an anchor for Channel 5, Channel 7 in New York, always in a tie, that we wanted to show a more relaxed, more approachable version of me with the open shirt. Thank you.
Well, and very few people know, but Ken's wearing board shorts.
I am wearing shorts. I am.
And, you know, they're sharp. Yeah. Very relaxed.
If I doze off, it's not because I don't love you all.
Let's not go below the table here, guys.
I did ask Mark. I said, Mark, do I have to wear pants?
Well, you know, I do want to catch some of Ken's shows, because I am curious as to, you know, what the subject matter is now that we've actually got a chance to speak with you. And are you able to go quite deeply into this? Are there any repercussions that you're worried about? I'd love to dig into a little bit more about what that's like for you and what the impact is on people that may watch you now. That it's got to be, obviously you've got to have some people who are like, what the heck's he doing? And some are like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I needed. So can you talk to us a little bit about what your experience has been doing that?
Yeah, I'm working with a team of people, some of whom worked for ABC, but ABC in Philadelphia. Mark knows that's the ABC owned and operated station in Philly. Some worked for a regional company, News 12, all of whom were dismissed rather unfairly from their respective companies, and all of whom coincidentally all were somewhat right of center in their opinions. And you just find, if it was one person, you'd say, but when we all have the same story, in fact, they even put in the New York Post an anonymous source who said one of the reasons why I was dismissed was he was rather Trumpy. Now, Mark worked with me at Channel 7. Mark, in all the years we worked together, did I ever talk politics? Ever. Behind the scenes, off the air, ever with you? Ever. Think about it.
We spoke about a lot of things, most of them to do with the company.
Right.
Which tended not to be very flattering. But as far as talking about politics, we both knew where each other stood, but we never got into, especially in office, anything politically, because the walls had ears.
Exactly.
And especially after our former crazy but phenomenal news director had left.
Mm-hmm.
And the newsroom took, again, a kamikaze nosedive into the toilet. You didn't dare talk about much of anything.
Right. Absolutely. So, in fact, that crazy news director who followed, not the one who looked like Khrushchev, he was nuts, but he was a great news director. The one who followed once called me into her office and said, I've talked to people. I know you talk about me behind my back. Can you imagine a boss saying that? And I looked at her and I said, Of course I talk about you behind your back. I wouldn't talk about you in person because you signed my checks. So and by the way, everybody else out there talks about you behind your back. And if you think otherwise, you're nuts. And I told her that to her face. You know, what's funny is the people who confronted her, she tended to respect more than the people who kowtowed and whatnot. That aside, but just to quickly answer about the show that I do, I am given total 100% carte blanche, to the point that I make my executive producer keep a bottle of Tums on his desk every day, and he takes the whole bottle in his mouth and chews them. I go off on rants. I do a news block from 7 to 7:15. It's all the headlines, and after reading pretty much a straightforward story, if you stopped it there, you would think it could be any, reading of the news from any station. I then interpret what, why, how, etc. I'll do a story, for instance, because it's mostly New Jersey centric. We're on New Jersey is the name of the channel, ONNJ. It's a streaming channel, and we're coming up at a perfect time because New Jersey's PBS just announced 25% of their company is going to be laid off. They're losing all their money because the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is no longer getting $2 billion in federal funding. And also there was News 12 New Jersey, which because of advertising drying up, they're shrinking. Their company, they do basically a 15-minute news block that gets repeated over and over again. So they're down to a skeleton crew. So we are here at the perfect time, and we're set up much like this. Everybody has a studio in their home. We have a professional studio as well when we do interview guests in person. We have a switcher, a director, a producer, et cetera, in different places. And we've been doing the show for 9 months. I am given, like I said, total carte blanche. So I start by giving you the news straight ahead, and then I interpret it. Just to give you one quick example is in New Jersey. New Jersey, we've had 20% rate hikes for our electricity last June and this June. And that's where mainstream media will end it. Or they might add that the governor of New Jersey blames the grid charging higher rates for the increase in prices. When in reality, the Democrats who control in New Jersey, the Assembly, the Senate, the governor, the Supreme Court, 9 of the 12 Congress seats, both U.S. Senate seats, and every single one of the mayoralties of the top 10 cities in the state of New Jersey. Think somebody's in charge? They decided because it wasn't green, they would shut down 6 massive power plants because they were hoping to get green energy plants online. So they shut down the power plants before they even green lighted a green energy plant to be constructed. So what happens with the rule of supply and demand? Well, now all of a sudden we found ourselves with not enough power at a time when AI was coming into play, at a time when the cloud storage was demanding huge amounts of electricity, and we were pushing electric vehicles, and the population was going up. Okay, so that's a perfect time to shut down 6 power plants. And then we were importing power from neighboring states at confiscatory rates because New York and Pennsylvania don't have that much extra power to shed. And then they blame other people. In fact, Mikey Sherrill, who's the Democrat running for governor of New Jersey, she says, the first thing I'm going to do when I get into office is freeze electric rates. Well, it's your damn party that caused the electric rates to go up. But the problem is mainstream media will never get into the detail I just got into. And it's so logical. You don't have to be a PhD to figure that out. If you shut down the guy who makes cotton candy and there's only one supplier of cotton candy left, damn it, yes, cotton candy is going to be $50 per serving. I mean, it's just supply and demand. You shut down 6 of the biggest power plants in the state because they're not green enough, and you don't build the green energy plants. And now you wonder why electric rates are through the roof. But yet you have Democrats in New Jersey who will vote for nobody but somebody with a D next to their name because that's the way my grandfather always voted. My father, my mother, my father, we were always Democrats. That's what we're going to vote. All right, sir, do you like grown men showering naked with your daughter in school? It doesn't happen. Yeah, it does. There are 3 school districts right now. There are lawsuits about that right now, sir. Do you like it paying 20% more for electricity this year, last year, and definitely again next year? Yeah. This is the problem. Until voters wake up we'll keep getting the same thing here. So there we go. Just want to give you a little 20-minute digression of what we do on our show in the morning.
Well, Ken,
Thank you.
one of the things that we know as obvious, if we get back to the idea of actors and masks and this and that and the other, I know mostly you were on set at that point, but I spent a number of days with Phil from New Jersey. That ain't Phil. Okay. That ain't even close to Phil. If that's a mask or an actor, it doesn't look anywhere near like the governor of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you get to let's say the alternative or the right conservative media, and I was watching this, I believe it was just last night or the night before, but they were doing this whole thing. I don't remember the show that it was on, but because he's Republican and running for governor in New Jersey, they're pushing, I know it's a name that you know very well, Citarella, from perhaps the most corrupt county in New Jersey,
Perhaps.
probably one of the most corrupt politicians in New Jersey, next to the guy who just got indicted. And yet, because of the R, they push him. So when I've said many times on the air that the alternative media has become just as bad as the mainstream media, how far off am I?
Neither one of the two candidates, by the way, will do a show in person. And my station is the station that's airing the debates. We aired the primary debates, and we are airing the first gubernatorial debate in a week. And in fact, next Sunday, we will be the channel airing the gubernatorial debate for New Jersey. Guess the station who won second place, Channel 7. We beat them. So just so you know, Mark, had to rub that in. But I find it funny that I was on the phone with the press secretary for the Republican, and they will not give me the gubernatorial candidate before or after the debate to talk. Why? They know where I stand politically. You won't come on my show. And the other major station in the state of New Jersey has a morning man who also ran for governor on the Republican side and lost in the primary. So he won't have Jack Ciattarelli on. So it's funny. They are both Ciattarelli and Mikey Sherrill are not doing any New Jersey media at all. You'll if they find a friendly face in New York where they're not running on Fox for Ciattarelli or on NBC, ABC, CBS for Mikey Sherrill, they'll do those shows, but they will not do New Jersey media where we actually know the questions to ask. Find that kind of funny.
Wow. So Ken, do you think that they're even real? Do you think that we're watching CGI? I mean, what do you think we're actually watching?
I don't know how on earth Jack Ciattarelli, for the third time, this is the third time he is running for governor. He lost the first time. He lost the second time. Why would you keep promoting this guy if you truly wanted somebody to win? Why this guy? We know for a fact he keeps losing. So my thought is they don't want him to win, or they don't want a Republican to win. Mikey Sherrill might be bought and paid for, so they figure we got to get her in. Let's not back him. Or I don't know. I don't get it. Or let's back the guy we know is going to lose. That's very possibly the case as well.
Wow.
Now, Patriot, I've asked this question ad nauseum, even while I was still working. You will never, ever, ever, ever find a reporter or an anchor or a moderator in any political rally, political debate, while these people are promising the world, ever turn around and say, excuse me, how are you going to do that? Why do you think that is?
Nowadays, or kind of
Always.
like always?
Always.
Well, I mean, it's. I think I would probably say that there's two different ways to look at that. When the enemy was still in control, I think the answer is pretty obvious. They didn't want that narrative getting out there, right? And I think you could probably say the same would be true today, but there's with a lot more nuance involved, because I believe that what we're watching primarily is it's kind of like we've talked about in the past, like the Q drops are the way I look at it. It's kind of like the blueprint or the script of the movie, and then you've got all of these different, I guess you could say, all these different theaters that are presenting the movie through a different lens, and they're allowing the talking points to get out there, but they're also allowing the voices who are going to completely upend whatever narrative that mainstream media is trying to put out there instantaneously, and thereby get people to start pondering those questions. Because a lot of people out there, the masses, the normies, as we call them, unless they're prompted into critical thinking. And Joe brought up the a little while ago, the comments, right? That's why social media is so powerful. Nowadays, people are going to the comments almost immediately, sometimes before they even read an article, without even reading an article, because the comments are more credible. They want to know what other people are thinking. And that was something that was always prevented in the past. But now that's the main difference, right? You still have the illusion of the mainstream media of old, but you've got all of these other voices who are chipping away at that narrative, and that has a trickle down effect, and it allows everyone else to say, wait a second, all of these other people are asking questions. Why am I not asking questions? And kind of get the, like I said, the groupthink mentality, the herd mentality, instead of just simply going along and swallowing what the mainstream media is selling without asking questions. I mean, as we know, they call it conspiracy theory, which is really synonymous with critical thinking, asking these types of questions like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to pay for that? That math doesn't math. That logic doesn't logic. It just, none of it makes sense. And I understand, because we've all, it's somewhat ironic, because I know that when some people, not your audience particularly, but when other audiences hear us talk about the white hats, and they hear us talk about the cabal and the Q drops, they think, oh, that's just crazy. That's just lunacy talk, even to this day, right? But it's starting to become more and more credible. I'll just put that aside. But I think it's somewhat ironic that so many people can acknowledge, especially folks who have kind of like they've sort of defected away from the mainstream media, but they haven't taken it a step farther to start looking into, Q, this whole concept of movie, people in mass. They still think that that's crazy. It's ironic that they acknowledge the illusion of reality that the enemy created, right? But they can't really take that leap and say, well, what about, why can't they accept the idea, or at least entertain the idea, that the good guys are doing the same thing, but they're just doing it in reverse? Like, if the bad guys can do it, then the good guys can do it too. But the problem is that they can't make it so obvious. They can't like break the fourth wall, if you will, because they want to maintain the illusion that all of this is happening organically. But every single day, you've got Stephen Miller is a great example. I mean, he gets on TV on a daily basis and just drops logic bombs and points out that the Democrat Party is literally a party that it represents illegals, it represents criminals, it represents rapists and murderers and pedophiles, on and on and on. Everybody except for law-abiding American citizens who pay their taxes and all of those things, right? And I think that message is, and that comes back to Mamdani and some of these other characters who are gone so far off their reservation that there's this juxtaposition where most people out there, they've been brainwashed for years. Like, my father, like Ken was saying, my father, my grandfather, my uncles, my mother, everyone's always voted Democrat. It's like they have that built into their sense of identity. But at the same time, most of these people do have, if they're prompted, they do have some instincts for self-preservation, and they do have some instincts for common sense. And that's why I think we're seeing that we're seeing the Democrat Party goes so far to the right and so far off the rails. And then you've got people like Stephen Miller and Tom Homan, and Trump, even with Trump derangement syndrome. It gets harder and harder on a daily basis to discount what they're saying, because it aligns with logic, reason, and common sense. And I think that's what's gradually being brought back. But the ingenious way they're doing it is because they're showing you how far, how extreme these people are, whether you believe they're actors or they're not. The reality is that was their agenda. That's their ideology. This is exactly where they wanted to take us.
Yep.
We're talking about a Bolshevik, communist takeover of this country. That's exactly what they wanted to do and fully intended upon doing. But you can't get most people to just believe that if you tell them. You have to show them that. And at the same time, you also have to point out and allow all of these voices to come forward, whether they be podcast hosts, whether they be news anchors, or whether they just be simply people in the comments that are picking this apart and saying this is absolute lunacy. And that's why I think we're starting to see that shift. And it's becoming, and again, it's not happening as fast as any of us wanted it to or expected it would, but it's undoubtable that it is happening, because all of the signs are there that mainstream media doesn't have any credibility. All their advertisers are jumping ship. People are believing strangers in the comments section over the talking heads that they're seeing on TV. That's why when they say we are the new media now, that really is the truth. It's we the people. That's what they're bringing back. It's no longer just simply a narrative that people are going to swallow simply because they're being told by some authority behind a desk, supposedly a talking head, with a fancy suit on and a $1 million studio and so forth. Most people nowadays, they have the opposite reaction to that. They see that and immediately their defenses go up and they say, oh, this is another liar. Right. And they're looking for people out there. Look, we don't have all the answers. That's for sure. And certainly we don't have to agree on everything. But the one thing we do have is common sense. And we're bringing that back to the people. People just want to hear organic, real conversation and ultimately come to their own conclusions. I don't think that the white hats want us to all think the exact same way. I don't think that that's the goal at all. We talk a lot about unity, but unity doesn't mean that we all just have a herd mentality and see everything exactly the same way. The unity isn't about getting everyone aligned on the same page on every single issue, but rather it's the acknowledgement that there's been this establishment system for decades that we've been born into that has brainwashed us and created this completely false illusion of reality that people have bought into. And again, it goes back to, it's just part of the human condition. It's the ego. People don't want to acknowledge, and it's like I was saying before, they can acknowledge that the mainstream media is lying, but they don't want to go a step farther and say, well, maybe this whole thing, this whole production, this illusion of reality that was created by the people who didn't have our best interests at heart has actually been co-opted by a good, benevolent force in order to achieve the goals that I just outlined. So that's the way I see it.
Well, Joe, bouncing off of that, when you consider the fact that they don't ask certain questions, and now the president and Press Secretary Leavitt have allowed alternative media into the press conferences to allow them to get either press passes or day passes in to be part of the press conferences, which I have done. I haven't been to one of the conferences yet, but I do have my pass. I still don't see them really getting any nitty-gritty questions in there. And this is the thing that has been lacking in the mainstream media for decades. And I don't know if it's just the people who they've allowed in so far, or if it's agendized, but something's not right there. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it does seem like there's a lot of censorship, and that there's, I don't know. I mean, this is how I feel about it. Until one of the five of us are able to go and talk to him, I don't know. I don't know. God, such a good question, Mark. I mean, just like the folders that were given, I think it was for the Epstein files that we saw a few months back. Was that what it was, Patriot Underground? I think it was for that. There was some folders that were given to, primarily, I believe, Jewish media, not the kind that, not the good kind, like Mark on the show here, but I don't know.
Zionist leaning podcasters.
Thank you. Yeah, I really don't know what it is that we're watching. I mean, News Treason and a lot of the folks on News Treason, they're very into the Q movement, and Scott and I are certainly aware and quite intrigued by it. And I believe that there is an underground behind the scenes operation going on. But yeah, who are they really going to let into some of these press conferences? I don't know. So for me, until I see the people that we talk to on the show able to go in there, I'm not sure I'm buying exactly what's going on. That's my take. And I will say, if you want to see great comment section, go to any type of post with Fauci, and you're going to see plenty of thumbs downs and people calling him out. And just to go to Michelle Obama now, and the massive comments saying that he's a dude, it's just like, wow. It's everywhere now. It's fantastic. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know what we're watching. If they want to bring TruthStream to the White House, Scott and I are going to have some very good questions for them. We might bring a few of our guests if they'd be so kind, because we've had some woo-woo stuff on the show. So I'll leave it at that.
What do you think about it, Scott?
So many thoughts. I mean, we're obviously having a very curated experience. We're watching a movie. I was just thinking when you mentioned that Matt Geiger tends to win a lot of debates or keep them really short with anyone on the left, because his response is always, Michelle Obama is a man. And he just leaves that on the table and they tend to slink away, But it's kind of funny. But yeah, we're having a curated experience. I was just in the back of my mind, I was thinking about something that we ought to do. Maybe we can do it collectively. Joe and I certainly ought to do this. Is have an award ceremony. If we're watching a movie, these are some great actors. And I'll tell you, best actress for me is Sandy Cortez. I get such a kick out of her. She's phenomenal. And she's done more for the conservative side of things than any conservatives in a lot of ways, just with those doe eyes. It's so funny. So yeah, we might assemble some clips and put together an Oscars type show. I think it'd be fun.
We should do it outside her grow up home in Yorktown Heights, which, by the way, I passed about 2 months ago. I had to go to a wedding up there, and I drove right in front. It's like an upper middle class, beautiful neighborhood. I used to work in that neck of the woods. For her to keep talking like she's down with the struggle from the hood, she is so full of baloney. And again, mainstream media has zero interest. Have you ever seen a picture of that house ever on any of the New York City media? Never. Never. Why?
Sandy from the block, right?
Right, exactly. Prove that she's a hypocrite.
Well, I think she's working for for the White House. She has to be. Nobody's that stupid. Come on.
Yeah.
Ken and I can name a few.
Yeah.
But I think they are. I think they are proving the mainstream media are hypocrites, but they're allowing them to put out their ridiculous nonsense. We see before, in the days of Jack Dorsey and before Mark Zuckerberg got flipped 2.0 status, those types of conversations would never be allowed, right? And that's where it's coming from. I think it's kind of a dynamic on both ends. It's like, on the one hand, they're allowing the mainstream media to continue doing what they do, but instead of amplifying it on every other platform, it's now being questioned on every other platform. And what you have is a situation where, I mean, you think about it, all of us have different stories about how we woke up, right? But usually at the core of that story, in some way, shape, or form, you started to realize that you were being lied to. That's like the first step in awakening, is like you're watching the mainstream media, you're watching what's considered to be mainstream credible news, and you come to the irreversible conclusion that they're full of shit and that they're lying to you. And that is exactly what the white hats are driving at here. That's the whole idea. And, to your point, Joe, you were saying, if you and Scott were invited into the White House press room, or, people like myself or others out there who are similar in what we talk about, they're not going to allow that. What they're doing is they're allowing voices in there, people like Benny Johnson, for example, okay, who I really love. I love Benny Johnson, but he's not going to go in there and start exposing the operation. He's going to ask questions that are going to get people to think, that are going to upend the narrative, but they don't want people in there talking about what's really going on behind the scenes and beneath the surface. It is like there's levels, and the people that do that talk about Q and that talk about people in masks and so on and so forth, they don't want that to gain traction. Like, I think that the good guys know that there's a certain amount of us out there who are onto it, and we're the anons, right? We're the ones that Q is communicating with, but they have no intention of bringing us into the White House press room, because again, that would dispel the entire illusion, and it would reveal too much too quickly. Like, they can't jeopardize the operation in the process, but they are certainly allowing new voices in there. Again, people, this is just filing into that same category of things that would never happen in the real world if the bad guys were still in control.
But I got to ask Ken, if you don't mind, what are your thoughts on Q? Is that anything you want to talk about or can talk about?
I honestly I've never delved into Q and gotten involved too much in the inner sanctum of that, because I've been involved in the so-called mainstream media for so many years, and it's only been 2 years that I'm outside of mainstream. I've always been somewhat right of center, but with a very strong libertarian streak. But the more time I've had to really give it thought, the more interested I was in it, because it's just it is an awakening of sorts. You realize this whole thing is a game. You have players at the top who are manipulating everyone and everything, and the rest of us, it's like the Truman Show. The rest of us, we just keep showing up, and we just think that we have input here. And no, people really genuinely control everything. But that's about as far. I have not delved into any conspiratorial groups or anything like that up to this point. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't be. I think it would behoove us all to get more and more involved and find out, because I think that you'll find out what's going to be happening 6 months from now if you get involved in those groups right now.
Well said.
Okay. It's like, you just really quickly, what I said about the mainstream media being the vehicle of waking people up, right? Initially, most of us, when we realized that, well, I'll only speak for myself, but I imagine that there are a lot of people who fall into this category. When I realized that I was being lied to by the mainstream media, I didn't just instantly flip a switch and say, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna go start looking into conspiracies." It's not the way it works. It was a gradual process. And you start to really the resistance is the first part of it. It's like you feel like you're being lied to. You sense that you're being lied to and you're being manipulated, but you've attached yourself to that ideology and that narrative for such a long time that you don't want to believe it, right? So you want to resist that idea. And I'm not talking about anyone in particular. I'm just speaking in general terms, mostly about myself. I didn't want to believe that I was being lied to, and it was a gradual process of seeking out alternative information. And a funny thing that happens when you start to do that, you realize how deep the rabbit hole goes. If you're willing to look in certain areas, suddenly you realize that all of this, the smear that the mainstream puts on it, this conspiracy theory label and this insanity, is actually a badge of honor. It means that you're actually getting closer to the truth. And again, I'm not saying, and I always say this from a very humble place, I don't have all the answers, and I don't suggest that everything that I say is necessarily going to turn out to be true. But one thing I can say is the more that I looked into Q, the more I couldn't look away. And more and more people, I think it takes time. Some of us, I think, are more willing. Some of us, I think, are spiritually, divinely prompted to go in that direction. Not everybody falls into that category. But as time goes on and the mainstream media continues to discredit itself, and people are resisting that because they don't want to let go, because they've always looked at everything else, every other narrative is kooky and crazy and insane. And that would mean that by extension that they were kooky and crazy and insane for believing it. They want to resist that. But eventually there is a turning point. And I think that we're getting very, very close as far as the masses are concerned to that major turning point. What will happen when the inevitable day comes, when Hillary Clinton gets arrested for crimes against humanity, or something along those lines that's going to completely shatter the world of these people. And of course, we could spread this. Mark, you're the host here. I don't want to take it in a totally different direction here, but that's the reason why the military is deploying all over the country, folks.
Well,
it's not for street crime and beautification. I got news.
You actually steered it exactly where I wanted to go, as if you were reading my tiny little mind there. I think in my humble opinion, I think that it's more so, it's got to be something that really jars the world, not just the United States. It's got to be something that really jars the world. And that's why I keep going back to the thought that it's going to be somebody like Fauci. Why Fauci? Because the jabs and everything else affected everybody in the world. And as all of you know, one of my favorite topics on respect and just in general happens to be about the children. And I'm sure that you guys probably saw during the week as Mr. Happy took on Pocahontas and just obliterated her and put out flat out, while she was ranting and raving to him about the COVID shots, how she had taken close to $1 million in money from Pfizer. And I don't care, honestly, how many push-ups or pull-ups he can do or how well he could keep up with Hegseth. But when the guy is trying to put stuff out there to help save the kids, and look, anybody with just that much of a brain who looks on our society and sees how many kids over the past couple of decades, and I used to listen to I'm Israel about this all the time, how the autism rates are climbing and climbing and climbing. And they really go hand in hand with how many shots these kids are being given. And thimerosal and all the other crap that's in these quote unquote necessary immunizations. You're trying to save people's lives. And yet what we're seeing is our quote unquote representatives playing partisan politics, trying to talk all of this down instead of trying to work for we the people. And you see the mainstream media, especially in your major markets, your New York, your San Francisco, your LA, your Chicago, all following them and making RFK look like the bad guy, instead of following the facts and saying, why do we have so many kids over the past 5 years healthy playing high school football, drop dead on the field or end up with myocarditis and things like that? This didn't happen 30 years ago, 20 years ago. What's wrong with this picture? Scott, talk to me.
Boy, my head's been spinning in a bunch of different directions because I'm thinking about the entirety of the conversation, and if we've all been deceived to such a degree that we are just completely scrambled eggs globally at this point, opinion-wise, as to what is the truth, what is the reality, then it's pretty easy to, by extension, to see how our entire history has been exactly the same thing. And it just seems like we're moving in a direction where, what truths are going to be revealed? What about all of them? This is really priming people. It's going to break a lot of people. The mechanics of this and watching it over and over again, we all thought this was going to be over quite some time ago. We're coming up on a decade, it seems. I don't know if I'm answering your question at all. I'm just sorting out the thoughts that I'm having in my head. This is definitely a turning point for the planet, and what an awesome thing to consider. And isn't it hard to believe? It's almost as if we're all being individually auditioned for what kind of future we're going to have, if that makes sense, based on, this has been an opportunity to examine your ethics and your principles and what matters. And there's every day there's a reason to stand up for something or a reason to shrink from that. And I don't know. There's a certain profundity in that. Again, I apologize if I didn't answer the question, but that was kind of what was circulating in my mind when you were opining there.
Well, Patriot, when you look at this, and you do look at the fact that they do, on a constant basis, pretty much so forever, avoid the important topics and avoid the aspect of those topics that would felicitate forward movement. It's evil.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, listen, you brought up RFK. I mean, is there a bigger red pill right now than RFK going on Capitol Hill and testifying again and completely exposing these hacks like Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, Senator Wyden? These are people who are attacking him, and he's pointing out the fact that, number one, he had to. What do you do when people don't do their job? You fire them. These are the same people that have been at CDC for decades now. And he pointed out this is a national security issue. You've got 76.4, very interesting, right, that they added the 0.4, you add those up. 76.4% of Americans, that's more than 3/4 of the country, are suffering from a chronic disease. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Anyone who hears that statistic should not be questioning why the CDC is being cleaned out. These people have all, to say that they failed is a nice way of putting it. The fact of the matter is they conspired against the American people. We are the sickest country in the world. In addition to being one of the rich, that's the other thing. We all get so indoctrinated with this idea of American exceptionalism. And in a lot of ways, that's true. But when you look at our country, just look at the health of our country. With 3 out of 4 people are suffering from a chronic disease. 8 out of 10 people, 8 out of 10 young people who are supposed to be in their great health and in the prime of their life cannot qualify for military service. That is a national security issue. So you've got that going. So he's exposing all of this. And at the same time, he's doing exactly what Q told us to do, which is to follow the money. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that people like Warren and Wyden and all the rest of them that are pointing the finger and they're yelling and screaming, they're putting on a show, which, by the way, I think is all scripted. But putting that aside for the moment, it's making it more and more obvious to the American people how right this is and how they are serving their masters. And as far as the jab is concerned, I remember when I was on a show not too long ago with Dave, and I think Mark, I don't remember. I think maybe it was the 3 of us. I don't know. But we were talking about, what's we were just mentioning a moment ago, what's going to be that big icebreaker moment? Is it going to be the arrest of, I threw out Hillary, who knows, right? Nobody knows what it's going to be, but you mentioned Fauci, right? And he talked about, and I agreed that the shot heard around the world might be referring to this, because when you think about it, they're gearing up to, they're exposing all of these things. The big story about Tylenol in utero just came out about autism. And what do all doctors, all of the doctors, they tell women, oh yeah, you can take Tylenol, but that's it. Nothing else is safe. And it turns out that that this is one of the major drivers of autism, right?
Well, just to interrupt you for a second. You talk about stuff like that. One of the things that I guess accidentally we recently found out because of talking to people. Probably the single most prescribed medication, especially for people in my position and a little bit younger, is hydrochlorothiazide. And doctors always tell you, and hydrochlorothiazide is basically a water pill, so that you don't retain too much water and obviously cause your blood pressure to go up. And they tell you to avoid salt.
Yep.
Do you have any idea what hydrochlorothiazide is? It's a salt pill.
Yeah. And when you go in for cardiac arrest, what's the first thing that they do? They give you injections of salt.
Yep.
I mean, absolutely. No, it's totally true. And as far as RFK, this is one of the reasons that I love this man so much, is because he points out he has a way of cutting, much like Stephen Miller. He has a way of cutting right through the narrative and getting to the point. And you know, that you've been hearing all along that he's been saying, well, look at how many, I don't even remember what are the numbers now? Like, one in how many kids are autistic? It's slipping my mind now, but it's I mean, it's astronomical. It's off the charts at this point, and it's only increasing. And so what's the main argument from the mainstream media, all of these and all of these politicians? Well, it's just the fact that we have better diagnostics. No, because RFK is saying, okay, well, if that were the case, then how come nobody my age? How come nobody in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s, they'd still be autistic? It's not something that you just simply outgrow. Why is it only the younger people? You know, so he's again, this is all being, and so no matter what the mainstream media does, no matter whether you think it's organic spin or whether you think it's scripted, it's all boomeranging back in their face, because most people out there, despite being brainwashed, despite being indoctrinated into groupthink and identity politics, they have survival instincts. They have some degree of logic and common sense if it's presented to them, if that argument is presented to them. And that's exactly what's happening. And what's going to happen when they reveal that this vaccine schedule that they're giving to kids is causing all, you think there's no connection there between 76.4% of Americans having a chronic disease and 8 out of 10 young people not being qualified for military service and the vaccine schedule? And what's going to wake more people up than that probably might wake more people up than anything else. Mm-hmm. What do people hold most dear to them? Their children. Yep. And who have they trusted? The doctors, who have trusted the CDC, who have trusted the politicians, and all the way up the line, follow the money. And so once this stuff comes out, it's game over for them. Who's going to, I mean, you can't make the argument once they present. And that's the other thing, RFK, and I'll leave it at this. He's saying what we're doing is we're actually presenting the American people with real science. And he's had so many. I mean, I just heard another one where a study that was buried about autism in Black children specifically. And they're paid, the orders come down, the money goes in, and they bury these statistics, and they publish these reports, these fraudulent reports that they put out there. I mean, these are crimes against humanity.
Oh, yeah.
And this is, I mean, there are no words that are big enough for this. There's no way to overstate this. And that's just one category. I mean, that's another conversation that's been normalized. We're hearing topics come up on mainstream media about crimes against humanity, about human trafficking, about missing children, thousands and thousands of missing children. This is all being discussed on the mainstream media. So again, this is why I believe that there's no possible way, if the bad guys were still in control, we still lived in the world that we grew up in, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And the nation wouldn't be the whole world wouldn't be having this conversation.
No, most of us would be dead already.
The dam is going to break sooner or later, and I think it's going to be sooner, quite frankly.
Right.
Now, Ken, you were in house during the scamdemic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
excuse me, just to clarify, by in-house, I mean in station, not in. The other anchors and reporters stayed in their respective homes. I was one of the few who actually came into the TV station. But yes, please go ahead, Mark.
Mark, I got to step away for 1 second. I'll be right back.
Okay. Now, we found out quite by accident, not by being told by the powers that be, that one of our colleagues had come down with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that was shortly before I retired. And it was quite a while before they actually went to telling people not to come into the station. And yet, do you ever recall a time while we're hyping all of this, distancing and the jabs, et cetera, that they came in and told us not to come into the station and scrubbed it down or disinfected the place?
Never happened. Never happened. And if you or I were 1 second late into work in the morning, we would have probably lost our jobs. Yep, we were all made to come in. It's just amazing. And by the way, just to incorporate some of what was just said by Patriot along this, I was quickly doing the Google and found out the number of kids who are autistic now, aged 8 and over, is up to 1 in 31.
Yep.
Yet
Jeez.
we're supposed to just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And when the study about Tylenol or acetaminophen in general came out about a month and a half ago, and how pregnant women should not take it unless absolutely positively necessary, and if then only once, and don't keep taking it. That's what the study said. I heard it nowhere. I only heard a little outlet here and a little outlet there. It was crickets. On my little show, we talked about it nonstop that morning. But everybody else, crickets. Why? That should have been the lead on every network newscast. Tylenol is the most commonly used medication on the planet, acetaminophen. And in Europe, it has a different name. They use it's a similar NSAID, but it's the same property. And they didn't talk about it in Europe. They didn't talk about it here because why? The pharmaceutical company that makes it, I mean, it's just so obvious. And I just want to hit a couple of other quickie things, if I may. Harry Enton was the guy we were talking about from CNN, who has all
Yes.
the facts and the statistics, who is just brilliant. And he must be pissing the left off like crazy, because I'm sure when they hired him to do all the stats, they wanted him to show what an evil man Trump was. And as he keeps making the phone calls and getting the information, just the opposite is coming out. He just talked about, this was the other day, the study came out on Thursday or Friday, that 51% of all Americans still trust the CDC to push vaccines. 20 years ago, that number was 71%. It is now 51%. This came out because of the state of Florida, their Surgeon General saying that they were working to make vaccines voluntary. They're not making them outlawed. They're making them voluntary. And by the way, the federal government still will have a requirement for their own vaccines, but the state of Florida is simply saying, they're not saying you're not allowed ever to have a vaccine. You want a freaking vaccine? Get a vaccine. Whatever happened to the party of my body, my choice, my body, my choice? Suddenly, it's not your God blessed choice. It's just insane. And by the way, what does a vaccine do supposedly? It protects you from getting infected. If you want to take a freaking vaccine, go take the vaccine, because it will protect you. So if I don't want to have a vaccine and I come down with measles, you have a vaccine and you believe in it so much, then you won't get the measles from me, the dirty boy who doesn't want to take the vaccine, right? So why do you give a crap if I want to have a vaccine or not? I'll just drop dead of the illness and you could laugh and piss on my grave. But the truth is, they know deep down it doesn't work. It's about power and control and money. That's what it comes down to. Because again, if the COVID vaccine did what they promised, remember they said you have to do it for your fellow American. Take the COVID shot so that you can protect each other's lives. Okay, excuse me. Isn't the COVID shot supposed to, is it supposed to prevent me spreading it to someone else, or does it prevent me from getting it? We later found out it does neither. It does neither. I was forced to take, in my time at the network station there, I don't even want to mention their letters again, I was forced to take 7 shots. 7 shots. You know how many times I've had COVID? 5. So much for this wonderful vaccine. If you have a vaccine, 7 shots in a matter of 3-4 years, you should not get the illness 5 times. I'm sorry, that's not a vaccine. So anyway, just had to get all that out. But again, the concept that if you somehow make it voluntary for people to get vaccines, that people will die. That's the left. That's the go-to, right? People will die. Really? No, only supposedly the people that don't get the shot because they choose not to. If you really believe that, only they'll die. And what do you give a damn? It was their choice. Remember, my body, my choice. And you will be protected because you claim the vaccine works and protects you. So what do you care? If I don't want to take it and I want to drop dead, what business is it of yours?
Well, that's when you had to protect grandma, right? Remember that narrative? The whole thing,
Yes.
guilt trip.
Right.
You're doing it for other people, not for yourself.
That's what
But
they said during COVID.
Yeah.
Just before I move on to Joe, in response to this, I want you to think back for a second, Ken, before we got into COVID. And this wasn't just at ABC, but it was at most of the stations. And we were all looking at it from the aspect of kind of an age discrimination thing. But who were some of the first reporters that they started getting rid of prior to COVID?
Oh, I'm trying to think. Over at Channel 2, didn't Dr. Max Gomez, he was older, he was gone.
By us?
And then he passed shortly after that, by the way. And also, who was the gentleman who was at Channel 5 and then Channel 2? Latino. Used to be in one of the gangs when he was a kid, and he always talked about it. But
Heavy
he
set.
also
Nice
was
guy.
also kind of pushed out, sweetheart of a man, and he also died shortly after. I think a lot of coincidences there, huh?
Dr.
And
J.
Dr. J, of course, absolutely.
So, I mean, they got rid of all of the medical correspondence.
Uh-huh.
And yet, here we go, and we fall into this. So, Joe, you're in probably one of the worst states for all of this. But how do you see what they've done in regard to, I'm sure you had plenty of the, my body, my choice stuff. How do you see the way that the mainstream media reacted to the jabs and telling people to distance and get the shots, et cetera, and how the people out there reacted to it?
Well, it inspired my first song that I wrote about this movement. Well, I guess the first one was called Hug, but when I wrote Freedom Now, I was literally watching people have their masks on in their cars by themselves. I'm just like, what in the heck is going on here? So, yeah, I mean, even now, I'll be going to events and people are outside or shopping, and they still have masks on. I mean, it's embarrassing. I feel bad for them. So, the brainwashing it's been very strong up here. So I mean, that's the simple answer. I had two things I wanted to ask Ken because I think people get my perspective on that. One is I think it would be great if you could get Harry Enton from CNN on your show. I think that would be a wonderful interview if you don't mind reaching out, and then maybe we could do a roundtable with him. But I had a question for you. When did you first learn about adrenochrome? And have you been able? That may not be something that you bring up on your show, but you're the only person I know that still. I mean, Mark's crossed all kinds of boundaries with what he's doing, but what was that like for you? I mean, I think it brought all four of us to our knees from the previous conversations we've had. But what has that been like for you? And is that something you can talk about? Do talk about? It's a lot for people to take, but I don't know who else to ask other than you about this.
I must tell you, you've stumped me, and I speak 7 languages. I don't know what adrenochrome is. Help me.
Wow.
It's about to ruin your night, Ken.
Yes.
Wow.
Hey, I'm on with Mark. Go ahead.
What they, as the president has said many times, it's all about the children.
Yeah.
And the trafficking of children, the abuse of children, the sale of children, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that has come to light through this whole movement that we've been through, this whole war that we've been going through, is the use of what is called adrenochrome. When you frighten a child or abuse a child to the point that they are hysterical and are crying to the point that they get what they call, you know what panda eyes are?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, to the point where they get that. The amount of adrenaline that gets released into their system is so overpowering that the black hats, the cabal, whatever you want to refer to them as, have looked at this as the fountain of youth, the potion to give you eternal youth. And they have raised kids in underground tunnels and traffic kids, et cetera, to drain the adrenochrome from their system, produce it, drain it, produce it, drain it, and sell it on the open market to a lot of people in Hollywood and other places. So adrenochrome is, I wouldn't call it a drug. It's a naturally occurring substance, but it can only be produced by children because of their age and because of their active systems. Have I missed anything, guys?
I mean, it's probably a good place to start. It's so dark and deep. I mean, once Scott and I learned what that is, that's why we started our show. I can't live in that world. And when these kids go missing, a lot of them, it's not just the rape and the torture that's going on, but that's why they're not around anymore. And I think that's why many of these depraved people go after the children, because there's a lot more to it. So yeah, that's likely a whole other show. And once Ken gets caught up on what that is, then I think we could go deeper into that. But yeah, just to bring you awareness. So I think that's a lot of our whys that are in this movement, is that's what's going on with kids. And pardon my French, but there's no fucking way I'm living in that world. Yeah. So
you just made me ill. And I'm not hurling an insult when I say that, but hearing that just made me ill. And yeah. I have heard of and I've seen documentaries in the past about people who use get blood transfusions, etc., sort of vampiristically from younger people to maintain or have whatever genetic makeup there is in there to maintain youth. I've read about that before. I've never heard the term, never heard the word, and didn't realize it was a specific thing that was being extracted. But the idea, it now makes sense. Why else would you allow open borders? Why else would you allow a limitless stream of humanity that you wouldn't keep track of come in? And why would you have kids with no adults have a note with an address, and hundreds of them would be going to the same address, and nobody thought that was strange, and nobody questioned it? And if you tried to question it, you were the weirdo, you were the bad guy. So yes, I will be doing a lot of research about that now. Never delved into it to the extent as I'm now thinking out loud with you, how disgusting and how vile. So these kids basically are human factories for this.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It brings you to you're never the same when you hear about it. I mean, I've never been, I'm not the same person anymore once I realized that what's going on in our world is worse than any horror film that's ever been made. So.
And the closest they've come to it in Hollywood is Death Becomes Her, with the little secret potion. But
they talk about it in other movies as well. I remember there's somebody mentioned in the comments, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. They mentioned it directly. Mark Zuckerberg tweeted about it back in the day. But this is an ancient satanic practice. This is nothing new. That's the other thing.
What is Dracula? It's Dracula. It's about sucking the youth and the vitality out of a younger, beautiful human being and bringing it into yourself so you can live forever. This is raw
evil Satanism that we're dealing with. And Joe is exactly right. This is the reason that most of us were prompted, because in reality, most of us, we weren't news guys. We didn't really have any. We all had other pursuits that we were involved with in our lives, but this is the type of thing. That's why I said when you asked that question, I was like, oh boy, this is about to this is going to be a moment you're not going to forget, because the first time you hear about this stuff, and by the way, as awful as that is they do worse than that. And when I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to totally disgust you, but it's a lot worse even than that. It's hard to imagine something worse, but we're talking about a level of evil that the normal mind can barely even comprehend.
Right.
And the truth is out there. So yeah, do your research. Google Adreno and Google Chrome. I mean, it just goes on and on. I've done entire shows talking about adrenochrome in the past. It's been a long time since I've gotten into it because it's hard for me to talk about, quite frankly. But this is the reality. This is the reality that we're dealing with. So yeah.
Well, I was just going to say real quickly, I reached out to 3 of my friends that wrote for the Tribune in town. One was in his 40s, one in his 50s, and one in his 60s. All vaccinated. One of them was very, very against folks like Scott and I. We knew him pretty well. And they've all since passed, and they're all jabbed up. And so I basically felt like, especially in the Northwest, Scott and I have to talk about it. I really don't know many other people that talk about it, but it has to be talked about, or otherwise it's just going to continue. I mean, once the world knows what it is and that it's not a joke and they don't run from it, that's the only way that we can get rid of it. If we can, I don't know. I think we need some divine intervention as well. But I welcome to our world now, Ken. I just wanted you to know our why, because our why is the children.
Hey, Ken, to give you just a little bit of perspective of how systemic this really is, Google, one of the largest companies in the world, we're all dependent on it. Everybody on the planet knows what Google is. Their search engine is called Chrome, and the engine that runs it is called Adreno. It's in your face. It's absolutely in your face. And for some historical perspective, look at the works of Aleister Crowley. This is a man that was allegedly involved in intelligence for the British and perhaps other agencies as well. Extraordinarily influential man to this day. Founded a religion called Thelema. You can look into that. A lot of people like to call this Satanism, but it really gets into some ancient Egyptian stuff and so on and so forth. And the hardest part for me to believe was this idea of pedophilia being rampant. The very idea of sexualizing a child is so repulsive to me and to most people that I know that I couldn't conceive of this being something so widespread. But it really is more about the power that they get from the sacrifice. And this is all Babylonian stuff. It's very ancient and it's very widely practiced. And there's a lot out there for you. But if you start with Crowley, you'll probably get a solid foundation for that.
Wow. Yep. That was hoping we wouldn't get into that, but it's something that we can't avoid. I've done a number of shows on child trafficking, and not a fun topic.
No.
Well, this is like what I was saying before. It's like once you start daring to look down these rabbit holes, this is what happens. And it changes you. It changes you.
Look at it not.
But this is ultimately, I believe, our divine purpose. All of us do, because people have been saying it in the comments. I've been saying it for years. We have to face this, as horrific as it is. And like I said, it gets a lot worse. But if we can't face it on behalf of these innocent children, then quite frankly, I mean, I honestly don't even think we're worthy of the oxygen we breathe. If you know about this and you don't talk about it, you don't do everything that you can to shine a spotlight on it, as far as I'm concerned, you completely missed the boat. So, I'm glad that I know we don't, Mark didn't really expect we're going to talk about adrenochrome tonight. I know Ken didn't when he asked that question innocently. Oh, you stumped me. What is that? But yeah, this is what I was talking about. These rabbit holes. And by the way, when you hear follow the white rabbit, which is very closely associated with Q, which by the way, Elon just posted the other day. I don't know if you guys caught that. That's what they're talking about. The chemical structure of adrenochrome looks like a white rabbit. And there are other meanings of that as well, like Alice in Wonderland and so on and so forth. We don't have to get into all that, but it's out there. And like Scott said, it's in your face. It's in the movies. Hollywood has been putting it out there for years. And once you know that these truths, you never listen to the same music the same way. You never watch a movie the same way. TV shows. I mean, it's like everything that you realize, whether it's having to do with adrenochrome, whether it's having to do with the pedophilia and all of the pedo symbols, the hot dog and the pizza and all of these things. You go and you start to watch all of these old clips of the celebrities talking about this stuff. They literally, it's part of their satanic belief system, is that they have to tell you, they have to reveal it to you, because it's part of their sick karmic belief system that they tell you about it. But if you don't listen and you don't hear it and you don't do anything about it, then that takes the bad karma away from them. But Scott's right. This is ancient Babylonian stuff, goes all the way back to biblical times, ancient Khazaria, and that these are the monsters that we're dealing with here. So,
yeah, we have people trying to assassinate Trump several times as he's trying to expose human trafficking. And we're supposed to assume there's nothing behind that.
Right.
That's the whole purpose of all of this. That's why it's the Great Awakening. But I'm going to make this the last topic, because I know Patriot Underground has an early day tomorrow. Yes. He needs his Bundy sleep. So let's get to this. Let's show me the money. Okay. Now, we all heard how President's tariffs were going to destroy our economy and how it's so evil. Heard all that from all the people on the left and the mainstream media and this and that and the other. And you see a little bit of a turn, from even on CNN, bringing billions of dollars a month into the country.
Imagine that.
And you see where the prices. This is actually the border crossing, so it doesn't really have much to do with that. But when you look at them talking about the backings of currencies globally, gold at an all-time high, over $3,600 an ounce, $3,653, where it closed on Friday, and then you've got even silver, 41.5. And these people just sit and rant and rave with no basis for fact. Just, again, it goes back to the same topic of TDS, but here we are, and we're trying to awaken people, not even so much red pill people, but to get people to understand, put down. I've always looked at the Great Awakening as knowledge and unity. Knowledge is the key to everything that we have. Ignorance is the destruction of everything that we've ever had. And boy, has that been proven over the past couple of decades. But knowledge is so important. And all of this knowledge is being presented to us. The hard part to get over is the unity, getting everybody to work together. So let's talk about how it's very, very plain to see what these tariffs have done to the economy, how it's gotten industry back into this country, et cetera, et cetera. But how the mainstream media is still purporting it to be the worst thing since unsliced bread. So let's start with you, Patriot. This way you can go.
Well, it pretty much is aligned with everything else we've been talking about tonight, right? The mainstream media tells you one thing, and reality proves something else entirely. And not only that, I mean, just that article that you brought up there, CNN, talking about how, oh my God, what are we going to do with all this money? Wait a minute, I thought it was supposed to bankrupt the country. I thought it was all going to trickle down to consumers, and we were all going to be broke. And again, it's just it's part of it. It's a great segue into it, Mark, as a final topic, because again, it aligns with every single thing that we've been talking about tonight. There's the narrative that the mainstream media, quote unquote, I think it's the Q media at this point, that is feeding the, or like we call it QNN, or Mike and I joke about the New York Times. You call it the Q York Times. Everything that they're putting out there, again, with the illusion, of course, the illusion for all of their liberal readers that it's still the New York Times of old and CNN of old. But imagine, it's like we look at it through one lens or perspective. Imagine the viewers of CNN. I mean, all 5 of them, they must be absolutely like stunned when they see this stuff, or the people who are still reading the New York Times. right? They're telling the truth about what's actually going on, but then they're spinning it like it's somehow a bad thing, and it's causing. And this is actually a really important point, I think, to highlight. I've talked about this many times. How do you reverse brainwashing? You have to induce cognitive dissonance, right? So they're watching this and they're expecting to see Trump bad, tariff bad, everything that he's doing with the economy bad, and they're watching it, and the anchors are talking out of both sides of their mouth. Like they're kind of parroting that thing, like, oh, Trump is doing all these things that are bad, but then they're showing you graphics that prove the exact opposite. So it's getting people to go, wait a second, what? I don't understand. And again, I don't think that there are stages to awakening. I don't think that. Well, I know that there are stages to awakening, but I don't think that people necessarily, they don't admit to when they're having that cognitive dissonance, and that's another really important point for everyone out there to be reminded of. Because I get frustrated as hell, Mark. You talked about. I mean, look, I live in Massachusetts. All right, you're from New York. Joe and Scott are from the Seattle area. We're all from these liberal strongholds. So we walk around every single day, and sure, we may still see the people with the mask on driving around in their car, right? But what we don't see is what's going on inside of their head, right? And the things that they're not wanting to admit to, not wanting to talk about. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. When you're first confronted with the truth, the natural instinct, if it doesn't align with what your prior beliefs were, is that you resist it. But you don't immediately start talking to everybody about it. You kind of you internalize it, and eventually it gets to a point where you just simply can't ignore it anymore, and that's when that shift takes place. So they're doing the same thing with the economy. Everything that they've said. I mean, and it's not just CNN. It's Bill Maher did a whole segment about it not too long ago, talking about how Trump was right about the tariffs, and I mean, it's all over the place. And so again, and as far as we all knew that the tariffs were going to work. You go back historically, and my good friend Mike King has talked about this many times to my audience, that we were the richest country. We had so much money in the 1870s, somewhere around there. McKinley was a big tariff guy. And they had to put together a commission to try to figure out, and of course, this was long before 1913 and the Federal Reserve Act and income tax and debt slavery and the fiat system and taking us off the gold standard. We're talking way before that. Right? Back then, there was no income tax. They just took in money. The External Revenue Service, if you want to call it that, that's basically what it was. And they took in so much money that they had no idea what to do with it all. And that's the money that ended up, building up the entire country. And of course, the cabal couldn't have that, right? You have to have, in order to control people, and it dovetails with our previous conversation about vaccines. How do you control people? You keep them sick and you keep them poor. Those are the two main ways, right?
And scared.
Yep.
You're scared, right? And constantly just feed you propaganda to keep you scared, to keep you living in a constant state of fear. It's really a mass MK Ultra that they inflicted upon the population. You go back to silent weapons for quiet wars. And when we talked about the vaccines, not just the vaccines. That's what we're learning about now, but it's also the big food processors. It's also the way that they poison our water. It's also the way that they do chemtrails and they poison the air. I mean, they've been attacking us in every way possible. And most folks out there don't have a clue. But, we're going into a golden age. Trump has announced that it's already begun. And I do believe that that is the case. It's just that we haven't quite realized it yet. We haven't fully walked the public through this process, this education process. And that's really what it comes down to across the board. I've quoted this many times. Elon Musk, not too long ago, or Elon Musk, as we like to call him, said that the only court that matters is the court of public opinion at this point. And if you really dissect that, if you think about who he is and how he's tied in, and the fact that he was basically, single-handedly on the surface, but we all know the truth beneath the surface goes back to those executive orders. There was a hostile takeover of Twitter that allowed free speech to happen again in America. All right. So he said that. Kash Patel very recently said, we're building a case for the American people. And he also went further and he said, we are in the process of educating the American people. Now, he was talking about that in the context, of course, of Russiagate and these ongoing investigations, the RICO grand conspiracy case. It ties into everything: the auto pen, the election fraud, Russiagate, WikiLeaks, Seth Rich, on and on. So he was talking about it in that context, but it's much bigger than that. Like you said, Mark, this is the Great Awakening. So they're building the case, they're educating the people before we fully are allowed to walk through that threshold and ultimately realize what's already been done behind the scenes by the military. So this is what's happening. We're going to go back to that system. You hear Trump talk about it almost every week now, about eliminating income taxes. He said our first priority is, to pay down the debt, which, I mean, I'm not going to get into that right now, but I think that's already been done as well. But that eventually that they want to eliminate income taxes. First, they started saying it would be for like lower income people. Now it's, anyone making less than 200,000. And now they're saying, well, we might just get rid of it altogether. I mean, you can see where this is headed. I mean, they're bringing in trillions of dollars. And that's the way that the country was built up back in those days to begin with. Those were all in that era. They were all hard money, gold standard Republicans, and there was pretty much a dynasty of them from after the Civil War, right about, I mean, probably like in the post-Civil War era, all the way up to 1913 and Woodrow Wilson, right when there was the Titanic, and that, I mean, we can get into all that on another show, but that's when everything switched over. So yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that we're being walked through this process, and gradually, and it ties into the Federal Reserve. Trump basically, taking control over the Federal Reserve book, the firing of Lisa Cook, the stepping down of Kugel, and now Mirren is in there. He's taken 71% control with his picks of the Federal Reserve. And the IRS, he's gutted the IRS. Look, you can see the process is playing out. So I'll leave it at that.
And the key happens to be, just like they've done all these decades, putting it right in your face.
Yep.
So
exactly.
Joe, what say you, sir?
Well, I'm going to keep mine really quick. Watching a gentleman who used to work at a steel factory, I think it was in Pittsburgh, just so excited that the work's coming back. And it was like TikTok videos, just a couple, about 30 seconds, just to see the joy and that the work's coming back to our country. And he was quoting the tariffs, talking about the tariffs and Trump. That's all I needed to see, and the smile on his face. And I'll leave it at that. I think it's pretty obvious what's going on. So, and thank you, Ben, for your very detailed version of what I said. I didn't have to say much. Scott, over to you.
You're muted, Scott.
Thank you. Sorry, there was a bunch of motorcycles going by earlier. Forgot.
Oh, come on. I know you had gas.
That's why I'm over, Mark. That's why I'm over here tonight.
So there's so many boomerangs that are coming around, and I really feel an acceleration to this stuff. I think September is going to be a huge month. I think October is going to be an even bigger month. And, whether it's the Epstein boomerang and where that leads, the tentacles of that go everywhere. When the legislation goes through to cut, pharmaceutical advertising, we watch the media choke because now they don't have, their backdoor access to USAID funds and whatnot. That's going to be a big reveal. Again, as far as where Trump is positioned, Jerome Powell, I see a pretty swift end to the Fed and the return of sound money. And that's everything. And as far as the national debt, well, most of it is interest owed to the Federal Reserve. There's that matter of, some trillions owed to the Chinese, but I think COVID kind of handled that. What did he say? 17 trillion back in the day? So
17, isn't it? Amazing.
Yeah, always. Oh, and for the rest of the world, we didn't talk about the 7 conservative candidates that all mysteriously died 2 weeks before the upcoming election in Germany. It's a global happening, and I'm feeling really, really good about where we're positioned. I think we're going to have a lot of perspective, coming into the end of October. I think we do have some scares ahead of us. You know, we've got Red October. We have, you know, the big scare event. I think there'll probably be multiple, and you know, that will heat up. You know, the sum of all fears. I think that's coming very, very soon. September 11th. I think we're gonna, you know, who knows, but overall, I'm extraordinarily optimistic.
Very good. And Ken, let's wrap it up.
Well, just to wrap it up from a media perspective, I think that as mainstream media feels more and more threatened, they're pushed against a wall, they're going to fight back harder and harder and harder. I don't think they will take what's happening sitting down. The only difference is nobody's watching and nobody, may I say shit on this show? Nobody gives a flying shit what they have to say. It's as simple as that. They don't care. The influence that mainstream media, it really isn't mainstream anymore. The influence that mainstream media has today is zilch, zero, nada, to borrow from the late Rush Limbaugh. And they still walk around with their chests puffed out with an attitude that everybody pays attention to what they have to say. And that just simply isn't the case. Quickly, with some numbers, when Mark and I were at Channel 7 in New York, the 25 to 54 adult rating was between a 1.2 and a 1.5. Let's just say that's a lot of people. It would be about 800,000 people in the 25 to 54 demographic alone that would watch the shows, or our show, the morning show, Monday through Friday. That number is now 1/4 what it was just in the last 5 years. Like from pre-pandemic to now, it is 1/4 what it was, which tells you where mainstream media is. They don't have the influence. Younger people aren't watching. They just pick up their phones, for better or worse. They check out their phones, they get their information, they go about their day. They're not paying attention to the traditional broadcast channels. So that's the one benefit, but we have to be able to harness the ability to communicate. We really have to go full force using social media and any other means necessary, because otherwise they'll have a resurgence. They'll just switch everything from broadcast, television, and radio over to social media and try to corner the market that way. So we just have to stay on our toes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, you know, first of all, it's always great to be surrounded by people I can call friends. That's number one. It's just been such a great discussion, such an honor having all of you together to do this, because gathering intelligentsia together, I'm including you in that, Joe. So gathering intelligentsia together to do this is really, you know, it's a rare thing that you get to do. And when you get to talk about what's really happening in front of our faces, that's a large, large, large contributor to this great awakening, because I've always felt that the mainstream media is the main tool of the cabal. Without the mainstream media, this wouldn't be happening. And without the internet, we wouldn't have been able to pull off what we've pulled off. So there's a lot happening, a lot going on. But I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to do one selfless thing again. I want to thank everybody who did pledge in to try and help get people trained. We did talk about the kids before, and this is very near and dear to my heart. You know, none of this goes to me. None of this goes to anything but training these people to learn how to spot trafficked kids, learn how to rescue trafficked kids, and learn how to rehabilitate trafficked kids. Every single dollar goes toward that. It's very near and dear to my heart. I hope it's very near and dear to yours, because this is what it's all about, the kids. And every single dollar goes to their training. So if you can, do what you can. Greatly appreciated here. But also greatly appreciated here, as I said, you guys are great. You know, you guys, it's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I think we enlightened a lot of people about a lot of things. And one other thing that's great, and I say it every week, thank you, Claudia, Cat, Carrie, and Dougie, because without them, we wouldn't be here. and they do an awesome job keeping you guys in the background in line. But they really do a fantastic job. We wouldn't be here without them. So once again, thank you all. Join us again next week. We'll have another great show. Thank you, Patriot Underground. Thank you, Joe and Scott and Boychuk, Kenny. Thank you for being here. It's been a wonderful evening. Everybody, have a great week, and we'll see you again next week on Respect. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.